Thomas boarded a merchant ship, which was anchored there near his home, and he dumped several crates of tea into the York River.
Thomas Nelson Jr.
Thomas Nelson Jr.
Thomas Nelson Jr.
Thomas Nelson Jr. was born on December 26, 1738 in Yorktown, Virginia, to a well-off family who made their living through agriculture. Well, like many of his peers, Thomas was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to travel to England for his education, which he did in 1758, when he attended Cambridge University at the age of 19. Just 2 years later, Thomas finished his education in England and returned home to Virginia to help his father with the family farm. Thomas began his political career in 1761 when he was elected to the Virginia House of Burgesses at the age of 22. Just 1 year later, Thomas would marry Lucy Grimes, and the couple would go on to have 11 children, one of whom, Hugh Nelson, followed in his father's footsteps and enjoyed a political career as a congressman for Virginia. In 1774, after hearing about the Boston Tea Party, Thomas boarded a merchant ship, which was anchored there near his home, and he dumped several crates of tea into the York River. It's pretty risky to destroy another person's property, and it's a pretty serious crime. But he was never punished for it. Just 1 year later, in 1775, Thomas was to be appointed to the Continental Congress to represent his friends and his family of Virginia. After an entire year of debates and discussion, Thomas was finally able to sign the Declaration of Independence on the 4th of July, 1776, at the age of 36. In 1777, Mr. Nelson continued to represent the colony of Virginia in the National Council. In May, while attending Congress, he was suddenly attacked with a disease of the head. In other words, he had a stroke, which left him paralyzed for a time, and it greatly impaired his memory as well. His health gradually returning, and the public demanding for him to return, he was finally appointed as a brigadier general and a commander in the chief of the forces. In this office, he gave the most important services to his country. His fortune allowed him to give money to the military operations. On June 12, 1781, Nelson was elected to succeed Thomas Jefferson as governor of Virginia. But the war would keep him from this new office soon after he accepted it. At the Battle of Yorktown, General Nelson led 3,000 men as part of George Washington's army. He learned that General Cornwallis had taken over his home for his headquarters. He urged General Washington to open fire anyway, even though the British were the ones in Thomas's home. American artillerymen refused to fire on his house. Nelson asked the gunners, "Why? Why do you spare my house?" They answered and said, "Out of respect to you." He said, "Give me the cannon." And at his direction, his own home was mercilessly bombed, leaving only rubble behind. This battle actually marked the end of the major fighting in the American Revolution. With the Revolutionary War finally over and the country well established, Thomas could finally leave this world and give in to his ailing health. On January 4, 1789, at the age of 50, he died. Charles Augustus Goodrich writes of Thomas, "Few patriots of the Revolution have descended to the grave more justly honored and beloved. Few possessed a more ample fortune. Few contributed more liberally to the support of the cause of liberty. It was the patriotism, the firmness, the generosity, the magnanimous sacrifices of such men that conducted the colonies through the gloomy contest of 7 years' continuance and gave them a rank among the independent nations of the earth. He saved not only his country, but all of America from disgrace, if not from total ruin. In the words of a darling poet of nature, it may be said of him, his life was gentle, and the elements so mixed up in him that nature might stand up and say to all the world, this was a man. I can hardly believe that he had the courage and the strength and the power within himself to bomb his own house. This was a turning point in the war. I am so grateful that he had that kind of inner strength in him, because I agree with the poet, truly, this was a man. The end.